Today, in this explainer, we're putting on our master mechanic hats. I want you to consider yourself my apprentice for the next few minutes, because we're decoding the absolute lifeblood of your vehicle, the engine cooling system. We're going to dig deep into the thermodynamic physics that actually keep your motor running, but more importantly, I'm going to teach you how to save yourself from some truly catastrophic repair bills. Okay, let's dive right into this.
Now here's a little physical paradox to get us started. We all learned in grade school that pure water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level, right? Yet modern engines routinely push coolant temperatures up to 250 degrees, and honestly, sometimes even higher when they're under a heavy load. So why doesn't the water simply boil over and explode into a massive cloud of steam? How on earth does the engine survive what seems like a physical impossibility? Well, the secret lies in a very specific, totally invisible safety margin.
So here's our game plan for today. We're hitting the physics of the safety margin, coolant chemistry and ratios, the dangers of localized boiling, radiator caps and altitude, home pressure diagnostics, and finally, essential maintenance.
Part 1. The physics of the safety margin.
Okay, the number one shop rule you absolutely must understand is that your cooling system, it's not just a fluid reservoir. It is a precisely engineered pressure cooker. Let's look at this number, 15 psi. When you increase the pressure inside a closed system, you literally force the boiling point of the liquid to go up. It's a physics principle called the Clausius-Caprone equation. In practical, everyday terms, every single psi of pressure raises your boiling point by roughly 2.5 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you've got a standard 50-50 mix of coolant and water, its base boiling point is around 223 degrees. But when your radiator cap traps 15 psi of pressure inside that system, the boiling point is physically forced all the way up to a totally safe 265 degrees Fahrenheit. That pressure is exactly what gives you your operating safety margin.
Moving right along to Section 2, Coolant Chemistry and Ratios. Now, pressure is really only half the battle. The actual chemistry and concentration of your coolant mixture are absolutely vital for protecting your system. The industry standard is a 50-50 mix of ethylene glycol and water. It gives excellent freeze protection and, as we just saw, boils at 265 degrees under pressure. But here's the trap some people fall into. They think, well, if 50% is good, 80% must be way better, right? Wrong. If you push your ethylene or propylene glycol mixture above 70%, you actually ruin the heat transfer efficiency. Pure glycol is a terrible heat conductor compared to water. And speaking of water, listen up, apprentice. You must remember this. Always, always mix your concentrate with distilled water. Using standard tap water introduces minerals that create scale buildup, and that scale will completely cripple your engine's ability to transfer heat.
And that brings us to a golden rule of the shop. Never chase an overheating issue with just water. If you have a slow leak and you just keep topping it off with plain water, you're severely diluting your mixture. Pure water completely lacks that necessary boiling protection when the engine is under load, and honestly, worse than that, it has absolutely no corrosion inhibitors. Without those chemical inhibitors, the water will literally just start eating away at your internal engine components from the inside out.
All right, Section 3, the dangers of localized boiling.
So what actually happens inside the engine block when that critical pressure or chemistry safety margin entirely vanishes? Well, you get boiling, but there are two very different types. First, there's nucleate boiling. These are small, temporary vapor bubbles that form right around hotspots, like your exhaust valves, and then quickly collapse back into liquid. Your engine is totally designed to handle this. It's normal. But the other kind is film boiling. If your safety margin drops too far, a continuous, solid blanket of vapor forms directly on the metal. Vapor is terrible at conducting heat, so the metal surface temperature violently spikes, leading to rapid thermal runaway. We are talking warped aluminum cylinder heads, completely blown gaskets, and spun bearings from oil contamination, and it can all happen in just a matter of minutes.
And honestly, here is the truly terrifying part about all of this. Your dashboard temperature gauge, it might read totally perfectly normal while this is happening. The temperature sensor only measures the coolant actively flowing past it. If you have uneven flow, trapped air pockets, or carbon deposits causing those localized hotspots, that film boiling is quietly melting your engine down totally undetected. You might only notice a few slight gauge fluctuations before complete disaster strikes.
Which brings us to Section 4, Radiator Caps and Altitude.
Think of the radiator cap as the absolute security guard of your entire cooling system. Most folks know the cap vents excess pressure, but it actually has two valves. There's also a smaller, bottom-mounted vacuum relief valve. See, when the engine cools down, the coolant shrinks, it contracts, and that creates a vacuum.
This bottom valve has to open to suck fluid back in from the overflow tank. If you ever walk up to a totally cold engine and see your big radiator hoses sucked in or collapsed totally shut, that vacuum valve has completely failed. It's an incredibly critical thing to check, because a failed vacuum valve means your radiator is slowly, quietly running dry over multiple drive cycles.
Now listen up, because I need you to memorize this safety warning like your life depends on it, because frankly, it might. Never, ever open a hot cooling system. Remember how we talked about 15 psi holding the boiling point way up at 265 degrees? Well, if your engine is currently running at 230 degrees and you twist that cap off, you instantly drop the system pressure down to 0. Without that pressure holding it back, the boiling point instantly falls back down to 212 degrees. That means the 230-degree fluid currently sitting inside the block will violently flash boil into expanding steam, literally blowing boiling coolant right into your face. Just don't do it.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the environment outside the car. Altitude directly affects your baseline atmospheric pressure. Say you're driving up a mountain pass at 10,000 feet. The atmospheric pressure up there is significantly lower than at sea level. This actually drops your baseline boiling point before your system even pressurizes. You combine that extreme altitude with the heavy engine load of a steep mountain climb, and your boiling point safety margin is suddenly heavily reduced.
And because that pressure is so incredibly critical, you can never just slap some generic, cheap cap onto your radiator and call it a day. If you look at manufacturer specs, pressure ratings vary wildly. A standard Toyota usually runs right around 15.6 psi, but a high-performance European car like a BMW, that requires 20 to 22 psi just to maintain its safety margin. Meanwhile, a massive heavy-duty Cummins diesel might only run at 10 to 15 psi because of its huge fluid volume. Always use the specific OEM pressure rating for your vehicle.
Let's get our hands dirty. Section 5. Home Pressure Diagnostics.
We are going to find those invisible leaks like a seasoned pro. The best part? You can easily perform a cooling system pressure test right in your own driveway. First things first, make absolutely sure the engine is completely cold. Then, attach a specialized hand pump tester directly to the radiator neck. You pump it up to match exactly the pressure rating stamped on your cap, so say 15 psi. And then, you simply sit back and monitor that pressure gauge for about 10 to 15 minutes to spot any drops.
Reading that gauge is exactly how you diagnose the true health of the engine block. If the pressure holds perfectly steady, you're golden. Your internal block is sealed tight. If the pressure drops and you see a puddle forking on the floor, well, you've got an external leak, maybe a bad hose or a cracked radiator. But what if the pressure drops and there is no puddle whatsoever? That is the bad news. That means your coolant is leaking internally, most likely pushing right past a blown head gasket and straight into your combustion chamber. Oh, and a pro tip, always use the adapter on your pump to pressure test the radiator cap itself just to make sure its internal spring hasn't weakened.
Now, if you do suspect that dreaded internal head gasket leak, you've got to run a chemical combustion leak test. You basically place the special tool filled with a blue indicator fluid right over your coolant reservoir. If there's even a microscopic crack in your head gasket, exhaust gases will bubble up from the cylinders into the coolant. The blue fluid chemically reacts to the carbon monoxide in that exhaust and almost instantly turns yellow or green. Using these specialized testers prevents you from misdiagnosing a blown head gasket, which can literally save you thousands of dollars in totally unnecessary engine teardowns.
Finally, Section 6. Essential Maintenance.
So here is the basic preventative care required to keep these thermodynamics perfectly balanced. You want to do a visual check of your hoses and your overflow reservoir at every single oil change. If your vehicle runs conventional green coolant, you need a full flush every 2 years or 30,000 miles. If you're running an OAT, that's organic acid technology coolant, you can usually push that out to 5 years or 150,000 miles. The reason we flush it is because over time, the chemical inhibitors deplete and the fluid becomes highly acidic, which will just eat away at your aluminum components. Use little test strips to check your pH and inhibitor levels, and remember our cardinal rule. Always mix your coolant with distilled water to prevent that nasty mineral scale.
I want to leave you with this one final provocative thought today. Knowing everything we just covered about the physics of pressure, localized hotspots, and silent destructive film boiling, if your temperature gauge reads perfectly normal tomorrow morning, are you absolutely certain your engine isn't quietly boiling itself to death? Keep that safety margin intact, check your caps, test your pressures, and your engine will run forever.